Good afternoon and good morning to those of you joining us from the West Coast, and welcome to today's Business Preparedness National Preparedness Month webinar. Is your business ready for disaster? This webinar is presented in collaboration between the Small Business Administration, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and the Insurance Information Institute. My name is Christina Gropp, Public Affairs Manager at IBHS, and I will be moderating today's event. The theme for National Preparedness Month this year is Disasters Don't Wait, Make Your Plan Today. Over the next hour, you'll hear from 3 experts on how to prepare your business for severe weather and other business interruptions. You'll be hearing from Alex Contreras, Director of the Office of Preparedness, Communication, and Coordination in SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance, Gail Moriton, Business Resiliency Manager at IBHS, and Loretta Waters, Vice President of Media Relations at III. Also joining us today are 2 small businesses. Allison Bishop, Internal Operations Manager at Spry Health, will share her experience with OFB Easy, and Janice Jecker, co-owner at Three Brothers Bakery, will share her insights and experience with SBA. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be emailed to all who registered for the event. All attendees are muted to prevent noise distractions. If you have questions, we invite you to submit them using the questions feature on GoToWebinar, and if time allows, we will answer them at the end of today's presentation. We have a lot to cover in the next hour, so I will hand it off to our first presenter, Alex Contreras from the Small Business Administration. Alex?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this very important and timely subject on disaster preparedness. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the Small Business Administration, if you're familiar with us, does a lot of work on behalf of small businesses and entrepreneurs to help them start, grow, and expand their businesses. But they also have another part of that mission, which is to help businesses recover after a disaster. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Next slide. So SBA's disaster loans are the primary source of federal disaster assistance to help private property owners pay for losses that are not covered by insurance or other recoveries. We offer low-interest federal disaster loans to businesses of all sizes, private nonprofit organizations, as well as homeowners and renters. The SBA Disaster Loan Program really is the only program at SBA that is a direct loan program, and it's the only program at SBA not limited to small businesses. So just to kind of put in perspective the type of assistance or amount of assistance that we've provided in past years for major disasters. Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Wilma in 2005 to date are the largest physical disaster event that we have responded to, with nearly $11 billion. After that, second largest disaster was the 2017 hurricane season with hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And if you look through the other examples here, you'll notice a trend. Most of these are either hurricane or flooding events, with the exception of the Northridge earthquake. And part of the reason for that is not only because of just the sheer size and magnitude of those particular events, but also the type of insurance that a lot of property owners have or don't have. We tend to see our numbers increase in loan activity when an event involves a type of risk or hazard that is largely uninsured. Next slide, please. So you can look at our program in a few different ways. So let's start with the business loans. We provide physical disaster loans to businesses up to a maximum of $2 million to help repair or replace real estate, inventory, machinery, and equipment. We also provide economic injury disaster loans for working capital up to a maximum of $2 million to small businesses and private nonprofits. Homeowners can receive up to $200,000 to repair or replace the primary residence, and homeowners and renters can receive up to $40,000 to repair or replace personal property. Another key part of our program that we try to promote for anyone who's coming in for assistance is the mitigation. And so if you have damage from a declared disaster event, you can receive up to a maximum of 20% of the total damages that you had to do protective measures or mitigation projects, really designed to help protect your property from future damage. So a couple of things we look at when we're qualifying an applicant. One, they have to be eligible, meaning they have an eligible type of property loss in a declared disaster area. SBA's disaster loan programs are automatically available following a major presidential disaster declaration that includes individual assistance. So right now, these programs are available to residents in Louisiana as a result of Hurricane Laura, to residents in California for the wildfires, and a number of other major presidential disaster declarations around the country. Once we've determined that you do have an eligible type of loss, which is fairly simple to do, we then begin to try to qualify the loan. We look at credit just to make sure that it's satisfactory and that you have the ability to repay the loans. Now, I should say on the credit side, we are very flexible. We try to make as many of these loans as we can. We realize that disaster survivors were not planning for this event. So even with challenging things on your credit, we still many times can find a way to approve them. A couple of things: if you do receive a loan, we're going to require hazard insurance on the loan if it's secured by collateral. And we will require flood insurance by law if the property is located in a special flood hazard area. We also require flood insurance by policy if the damage was caused by flood, even if the property is not located in a special flood hazard area. And that's a really key thing because it helps ensure that the investment that you're making to rebuild your business, or in some cases your home, is protected against a similar damage in the future by having that flood insurance, even if you're not required by law because of the current flood zones. Next slide, please. So right now, the current interest rates for the SBA disaster loan programs for any events that occur in the month of September. For home loans, it's 1.188%. For business loans, it's 3%. And for nonprofits, it's 2.75%. The terms can go out as far as 30 years. In some cases, we do make loans for 15 years. It really depends on your cash flow, and if you're able to repay the loan within 15 without suffering a financial hardship, then we might offer you a 15-year loan term. Otherwise, the standard term is 30 years. Back to mitigation. So as I mentioned before, SBA disaster loans are a really useful tool for property owners to get affordable assistance to make protective measures to protect their property. Those funds can be used for things like flood mitigation, to seal your roof deck, elevate structures, add sump pumps, to wildfire mitigation, including adding or installing a Class A fire-rated roof, wind mitigation, bracing, and upgrading to a wind-rated garage door, and also different types of earthquake mitigation. But I can't stress enough the importance of looking at the SBA disaster loan as a way to do mitigation, because the interest rates are low and because it is so affordable, that if you've gone through a disaster and you're rebuilding, that is a key time to look at building back stronger and more resilient. Next slide, please. So just really quickly at a high level, because you guys are going to get the benefit of hearing from a business owner who's gone through this experience before, but I wanted to give you a high level overview of the steps involved with getting an SBA disaster loan. Step one, of course, is to apply. Most application deadlines start with a 60-day period, but we always encourage people to apply as early as possible. And the reason why is, if you are approved, you're not obligated to take the loan, but at least you know what's available to you. And for business owners, that's really important. Even if you don't qualify for the loan, you really need to know what your options are, what which resources are going to be available to you, so you can make those tough decisions through the recovery period. Step 2 is after we've gotten your application, we do a damage assessment. Most times this is done over the phone with the applicant. We ask a series of questions, and we use third-party information about the property in order to come up with an initial damage estimate. That's really the start for the loan amount. After that, we then begin to look at the credit and the repayment ability to see if we can approve it. All of this, depending on workload, can take up to 2 weeks. Generally, it's faster than that, but I will say right now, we are experiencing unprecedented levels of activity due to coronavirus. So if you are in one of these areas that has a declaration right now, and you're kind of waiting to see what will happen with insurance or what will happen with other programs before you apply, my advice to you is apply now as soon as possible, even if your insurance is still pending, because SBA can approve and disperse your loan. And, if it's an insurance issue, once it's settled later on, we do an assignment, and you can always pay down the loan if there's any duplication. Step 3 is loan closing. So if you qualify and we're able to approve it, you sign your loan closing documents, and within 5 days, we're making an initial disbursement of $25,000 for physical damages and $25,000 for economic injury. So that way you can then begin to do the rebuilding project. After that initial disbursement, we'll need to see receipts and contractors' estimates and things before we schedule the other disbursements. So that way you can continue the work. So very important, keep all of your records and receipts. Last part is, how to contact us for more information. Go to our website, sba.gov/disaster. We have a lot of information on there about our programs, ranging from the coronavirus to the other natural disasters that we're responding to right now. If you want to talk to somebody in person, you can call 1-800-659-2955, our call center, or you can email us at disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. I have the pleasure now of introducing our next speaker. So there's a saying that goes, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And our next presenter, Janice Jucker, is really a living testimony to the wisdom of that advice. Janice and her husband, Bobby, they own Three Brothers Bakery in Houston, Texas. The business was founded by Bobby's father and 2 uncles in 1949, just 4 years after the brothers were liberated from a Nazi concentration camp. Since then, the bakery has survived a number of natural disasters, including tropical storms, hurricanes, floods, and even a fire. But nothing as severe as Hurricane Harvey that occurred in August 2017. Hurricane Harvey dumped more than 30 inches of rain on Houston in just 4 days. They had over 5 feet of water inside the bakery. Inventory, machinery, and equipment was destroyed, and the operation was shut down. But not for long, because the Juckers had planned for the worst. And they had a business recovery plan in place, which enabled them to be up and running in just a little over 2 weeks. And in just 6 weeks, they were back to 100% fully operational. So a pivotal part of the bakery's recovery was an SBA disaster loan. But as you're going to hear from Janice and all of the other speakers, is that loan assistance is just one piece of the puzzle. There's so many other things that you need to take into consideration when preparing for a disaster. So to share her recovery story and lessons learned, I am very pleased to introduce Janice Jucker. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Alex, for that nice introduction. And I also want to say thank you to the SBA, IBHS, and III for including me today. My husband and I, we call ourselves the king and queen of disasters because we have been through 4 floods, a fire, hurricane, and now the pandemic, and our business has survived all of them. And I'm proud to say we've paid our team through all of them as well. And through it, we kept learning. So today I'm going to talk to you about some advice on how to recover, and we're going to get a few bits and pieces sprinkled into that recipe. We would be out of business 3 times now if it weren't for the SBA disaster loan program and now the PPP, and also an incredible insurance agent who made sure that we had the right coverage. Later, you're going to hear from Loretta with III about different types of coverage, and I'm going to tell you, I have had claims using every single one of those coverages and more, so take good notes. And then all the photos I'm showing you are actually from the bakery and our experiences. So we're ready for the next slide. So the first one was Hurricane Harvey, and then the top left is what our production area looked like after the water receded. In the middle, you see a silver kind of box. That was an ice machine with 800 pounds of ice in it. So water is very powerful. The other 2 were from Hurricane Ike, and the roof came off and ruined the bakery. Next slide. And then you can see the extent of the damage. So for Hurricane Ike, we were closed for 9 months, but because we had good insurance coverage, we were able to rebuild, pay our team, and reopen. Okay. So what we've learned through all of this is that there's 4 parts to recovery. So the first part is people. After a disaster, you're going to find, and I'm talking about normal disasters, not pandemics, okay? So after a disaster, find your people. Make sure that all their needs are handled. Make sure you have their phone numbers in the cloud versus having to recreate it on a brown paper sack, which is what I did with Hurricane Harvey. And then make sure they've got clothing, shelter, food, a car to drive maybe, whatever they need, get it handled. And that's everybody on your team is doing that. And then let your customers know what's your status. Are you open, closed, how long you're going to be open or closed, or maybe you even need their help. So let them know. The next thing is money. So I always say, if you don't have money, there's no reason to muck out your business, because that is what it's going to take for you to recover. And I always say you have short-term and long-term money. Short-term money is the cash you're going to need to pay your team. And you want to pay your team for multiple reasons. Number one, they need security. They need to know that they're going to be okay financially. Then you need them to reopen. So it's mutually beneficial for you to pay your team. And you can only pay your team with cash. You cannot put that on a credit card, but you can put everything else on a credit card. Conserve your cash. You're going to get insurance monies or like SBA disaster loans. This is your big money that you're going to need to fully recover. You want to be now working on getting your credit score as high as possible, because since we're going to conserve our cash, we're going to finance any equipment or whatever that we need to buy in order to recover. So your credit score is going to start taking hits. And then you want to keep your financials current. So, it's September right now. I don't want to be in the midst of a disaster and have to come and get my 9 months of financials current. Keep them current, and then you just have to do a little bit to finish up. So you have people, money, assets. So in the picture, I don't know if you noticed, but our vans were underwater, and I would advise, if it's a flood, move your vans. We've learned that. But so my husband, in the case of a flood, you don't want to buy everything in the town of the flood because you don't know what's the status of those cars or equipment. So my husband's going all over the country buying the things that we need to recover. He went to Arizona to pick up a van, and Atlanta to pick up a van, and this place to get, some bakery equipment. So just know that that might have to happen. So think about, how are you going to procure everything? And then you're going to have a team of people, which I'm going to go over on another slide. And I'm also going to talk about your lawmakers. And then the fourth part is clean up and return to operations. So we told our customers that we were closed in the first part under people. Now we need to let them know that we're open and anything that's changed. So like in the pandemic, we now offer curbside or whatever it is. So anyway, next slide. So let's talk about your team. You're the head of the team. So you're number one. Number two, you're going to have a field adjuster and an administrative adjuster from the insurance company. So someone's going to physically come out and survey your damage, and then they're going to give all that information to someone in an office who does the paperwork part, and you're going to have to communicate with both of them. And you're going to have to feed that administrative adjuster lots of different spreadsheets of your what you lost. Something you can do in advance is look for a restoration company now and develop a relationship with them. A lot of them take insurance, and you just let them know what your insurance is. And then before every storm, when there's a storm in the Gulf, and we've had 3 now this year, I text the restoration company and say, okay, I want to be number 1 on your list. And that's going to help you recover faster. And if you have a contractor you like to use, give them a heads up. You also want to have a good accountant and bookkeeper. So the accountant is going to, I changed accountants after Hurricane Ike, and she would negotiate with the insurance company on the payments, because there's a math problem they do to pay you. I have what's something called business interruption, and it gives you your lost revenues. And there's a math problem that goes with that. And that math problem seems to change every single time they give you a payment. So I just let her deal with that. And then the bookkeeper is going to keep track of everything and maybe even work on those spreadsheets I mentioned. You're going to need, if you have really bad damage, you're going to need a variety of trades. So if you might want to start looking for those if you think you're going to need them. A lawyer, maybe, hopefully not. Political help. So one thing I tell everyone is you need to know your lawmakers at every single level of government. You do not have to agree with their politics, but they work for you. And sometimes you need their help, and you want to be able to call them and within a few hours have them helping you. And that's exactly what happened to us with Hurricane Harvey. I was able to call my congressman's office to get some help, and within 5 hours, yeah, it was all taken care of. And then our congressman got voted out that January. I was knocking on the door of our new congresswoman and saying, hi, I'm Janice Strucker. I own a small business. I want to be a resource for you, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they know me, so I know I can call them again. You also have on your team your insurance agent, and I really recommend that you use an agent that sells insurance from different companies, so that way they can put together a package that suits your business best. And don't go buy everything direct yourself, because you're going to leave something out, because we already did that. So just learn from our mistakes. And last, but certainly not least, is the SBA. And so I just want to tell you about my experience with them with Hurricane Ike. I went to a seminar put on by the Small Business Development Center about small businesses and if you need help recovering. I didn't know what the SBDC was. I didn't really know what the SBA was, but this woman said there's something called disaster loans, SBA disaster loans, and we have people in our office. We have an office you can go to and get help. Well, I didn't know any of that. Well, the next day I was at their office. I looked like a deer in the headlights with my husband. They assigned us a consultant, like a business consultant, who was my consultant until she retired 10 years later. And they helped us through the process. There was someone that helped us with our application. They have classes at the SBDC. I didn't know that. I started taking the classes. Then from that, I actually was in the SCORE Emerging Leaders class. I took that class. I have what's called a SCORE mentor, which is another business mentor. And I mean, and then we've of course had our SBA disaster loans. So we got a whole lot more than just loans. We got a lot of help as well. And most of it is free, and free is good. Okay, next slide. So you heard a little bit about the disaster loans. I'm going to tell you it does involve some paperwork, and so you do need someone who enjoys or at least does paperwork. Like my husband cannot do paperwork. Our business is a little complicated now with Harvey. It was pretty complicated with Ike, it was not. So, but for every related entity to your business, you're going to need 2 years of tax returns for the business and all related entities. You're going to also need that for your personal net worth with backup documents. So like brokerage statements is a backup document, and maybe even some of your bank statements. Large contractual obligations such as a lease, your partnership or incorporation papers, your formation papers, and then you're going to need 2 years of P&Ls, balance sheets, and then your current financials year to date. And then maybe if there's anything else that's big, they should know, like you bought out a partner and you're still paying off on that, then they're going to want to see those buyout papers. So it's not, if you keep everything in the cloud, like when we hang up from this webinar, go try to collect all this stuff and put it in a file in the cloud. I do that. It's called SBA Disaster Loans. And so then when I have a need for it, and you need it for a lot of different things, not just a disaster loan, I go to that file and I just have to update the current tax returns and the financials, and my current personal net worth. It makes it so much easier if you already have it in a folder. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I have just a few more things, but in order to recover, one resource that's really hard to find is dumpsters, and you cannot recover without dumpsters. And Harvey, it took us 2 weeks to get a dumpster. So try to start figuring out where you're going to get your dumpsters, and if you need containers to move things out to, if you're going to need mobile homes to act as offices, those are also hard to come by, and get them with a bathroom. If you need a contractor, be sure to check the references. Don't use storm chasers, because then when you have warranty work, they're off in Maine or wherever they're from, and you're never going to get that done. The other thing is you need to be good at the art of negotiation. So there's something, an add-on to the policy is called extra expenses, and for instance, that pays for the mobile home. And it pays for a variety of things that are not covered in the regular policy. So I just kept asking, okay, I want coverage for this, I want coverage for that. This is Hurricane Ike. And I got it because I asked. If you don't ask, you don't get. But you do have to be a little bit of a salesperson. So if you're afraid to ask, then have someone else do this for you. And then the other thing is be willing to compromise, because it is a give and take. And then also, just FYI, the permitting process, if you need permits, that could be a problem as well. And there are companies you can hire to help you get through the permitting process and make things go faster. Periodic payments. When you have the field adjuster come out, tell them you want to get a check, and they'll usually write you a check for about $50,000 based on contents. And then a month later, ask for another payment. And then after that, they're going to require you to start proving your case, but you can usually get some money out of them. And then the other thing is, the reason you want to apply for that SBA disaster loan is, even if you have good insurance, it takes years to get all your money. So with Harvey, I'm still working on Harvey, and that was 3 years ago. I took 2 years. So my SBA disaster loan officer, she recognized we were going to have cash flow issues. And so she said, you need to apply for more money. And so we did do that. And we would have been out of business if we hadn't done that. Also, don't call FEMA for business issues. They are not for us. It's the SBA. They take care of small business. Okay, next. Almost finished. So you want to know, you want to buy the best insurance you can buy to replace everything, including your revenue. And on business income, buy the maximum amount that you can afford with the lowest deductible and waiting period. So we have 12 months. It pays for 12 months of business income. And then also I have 4 months to reach once I reopen, to reach my previous year-over-year revenue. So I buy the max I can get. Confirm how long for final submissions. And this is also important if you have a construction project associated with it. Have your lawyer draft a release of lien, have every single contractor sign it and have it notarized. Do not pay them unless you get that release of lien, and then you physically go down to the county clerk and have them recorded, because you don't want any clouds on your title. So that's probably, and that's one of the last things you're going to be doing. But anyway, that's really important. And then lastly, next slide, you have a party and you invite everyone to come to your opening. So that's it from me. And then you have my contact info at the end, and I will help anybody who needs help.
Thank you so much, Janice, for sharing your insights with us. We'll now have Gail Moreton speak from IBHS.
Thanks, Christina and Janice. So IBHS is an independent nonprofit scientific research and communications organization, and we're supported solely by property insurers and reinsurers. IBHS's building safety research leads to real-world solutions for both home and business owners, and we do this by building stronger, more disaster-resistant buildings, developing business continuity and recovery programs, and then making individuals, businesses, and communities more resilient in the event of loss. In 2010, IBHS created a unique state-of-the-art research center in Richburg, South Carolina. We are the only lab in the world that can fully engulf full-sized 1- and 2-story structures to a variety of different hazards, including rain, wind, hail, and wildfire. The heart of the research center is our fan array with 105 fans. Each one is equipped with 350 horsepower motors and has a diameter of nearly 6 feet. So with these fans, we're able to create realistic category 1, 2, and 3 hurricanes, extratropical windstorms, wind-driven rain conditions, and strong thunderstorm frontal winds. So IBHS has turned our research and insights into 2 programs, the Fortified Home and the Fortified Commercial programs. They are nationally recognized building methods based on more than 20 years of scientific research and our real-world testing. The fortified standards build upon building codes by improving performance against natural hazards and reducing the risk of property loss. The programs are an effort to encourage builders, home and business owners to use the higher standards for new construction and re-roofing to better protect the structures against severe weather, especially high wind events like tropical storms and hurricanes. So whether you are a homeowner or you own a business, after a disaster strikes, rebuilding beyond local building codes will improve structural performance and reduce the risk of property loss. So as Alex mentioned earlier, when rebuilding after a disaster, an SBA-backed disaster assistance loan can be increased by 20% to pay for mitigation repairs or improvements. This extra amount can be used by rebuilding to our fortified standards in various ways. Just a few of them are mentioned right here on the slide. So to find out more, I recommend you go to fortified.org, which provides information on the IBHS professional standards, training opportunities for building professionals, and then other technical resources. And then another site to visit is disastersafety.org. This site was designed for home and business owners, and it provides do-it-yourself guidance and projects sorted by risk and property type. And then in addition, there are links to our newly relaunched version of OFB-EZ, as well as our other toolkit, EZ Prep, which is an emergency preparedness and response plan. So in 2013, IBHS created OFB-EZ. It is a free streamlined tool designed to help even the smallest businesses focus on planning for any type of business disruption, so you can quickly reopen and resume operations following a disaster. Today, we relaunched a new streamlined version of OFB-EZ. It's an easy-to-use tool that does not require any previous experience with or knowledge of business continuity planning. The toolkit and the fillable forms are available in both PDF and Word formats, and they can be downloaded from the IBHS website at disastersafety.org. The Spanish translation of the 2020 version is currently being conducted by the professor and students of the Spanish Translating Skills program at the Tulsa Community College in Oklahoma, so that will be available soon. IBHS has identified 10 critical areas business owners need to pay attention to help you recover when disaster strikes. So the first module is Know Your Risks. A risk is any event or situation which could cause a financial or operational impact to your business. Your potential risks should be measured in probability, so that's what is the likelihood that risk will occur and how often, and then in severity, what is the amount of damage that risk is capable of causing your business. For the risks and threats that score the highest, you will want to assume these threats will strike your business. So then you should determine what controls and steps you can implement to minimize your risk. The next module is Know Your Operations. Do you know which of your business functions are most important? Definitely those with any legal, contractual, regulatory, or financial obligations. And then those other functions that will need to be recovered in the first, let's say 24 hours, first couple of days, or the first week after a disruption occurs. So once you determine which functions are most important, for each of those business functions, you should then document who performs and helps performs that activity, what technology is needed, what about other dependencies, how is the activity performed, and are there any workaround methods if that dependency isn't available? Can it be performed at a different location? And then who receives that final product or service? This next module is Know Your Employees. A business owner's most valuable asset are employees. Therefore, it's critical for you to know how to contact them after a disaster. One, you want to make sure they're safe. Two, to let them know the status of your business and operations. And then three, how and when they can get back to work. So this can only be accomplished if you have collected, maintained, and have access to the current contact info for all your employees. Next comes Know Your Equipment. Often, businesses have particular equipment that serves as the primary source of a successful operation. So if such equipment fails or was unavailable, the business may have to restrict production of goods or services, or be forced to close or even shut down. So you should identify the key equipment and machinery necessary to perform your critical business functions. And as you heard from Janice, her delivery vans, her company-owned vehicles, were of great importance to her bakery. So documenting and making plans for how to replace them, either permanently or temporarily, would fall into this module. So knowledge of equipment exposures and the impact to your business operations is critical to properly manage the exposure. The Know How to Reduce Potential Disruptions module is one of our new additions. Risks from loss of production can cause harm to sales, profits, and your market share. So while many businesses have specific operations, this module includes general questions or things to think about relating to your internal and external production processes, makeup capabilities, your product and inventory, your perishable stock, power, shutdown and startup plans, and other miscellaneous general operations questions. So the same logic that applies to knowing your employees also applies to this module. Know your key customers, contacts, suppliers, and vendors, all of your key stakeholders. One of the easiest ways to maintaining current info is to have your accounting department provide your planner with all current contact information about your suppliers and vendors, as well as any ongoing changes. Products and services supplied by a third-party supplier is critical. It may be difficult or impossible to run your business without them. So therefore, it's important to know how to reach them and contact them. Know your information technology and vital records. This module is for creating a record for each piece of hardware, software, and vital record that was uncovered when you completed the Know Your Operations module. You should plan for how these items will be made recoverable and available to your staff in times of disruptions. Know your finances. This module includes a checklist of financial items to consider before a disruption or disaster strikes. Considerations such as who can activate or has access to the business's line of credit? Do you have emergency cash on hand and who has access to it? How will you process accounts payable and receivable? And then do you have a payroll policy when you close due to a disruption, and are your employees aware of this policy? So once your policy has been developed, you may think you could check it off your to-do list. However, if your plan is to be successfully deployed when the need arises, it must be reviewed and updated continually. We recommend that you review and update your plan either every 6 or 12 months. And then in addition, this module provides a simple power outage exercise scenario that you can conduct with your staff. So you should gather your employees to discuss the actions and questions provided. And this can be done informally, such as during a working lunch or as part of a staff meeting. You'll also want to update your plan based on feedback from the exercise. So your relationship with the community and your outside agencies can strengthen your ability to protect your employees and your property and to help you return to normal operations. In this final module, we've provided a list of organizations that are able to provide beneficial resources to help you prepare for and recover from natural or other types of disruptions. So while you've heard me state that using OFBEZ is streamlined, it's easy, it was designed for the smallest businesses, but don't just take it from me. Let's hear it from someone who has actually used the guide. I would like now to introduce you to Allison Bishop. Allison is the Internal Operations Manager at Sprice Health, and they are located in Northern California. Allison, are you there?
I sure am, Gail. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Allison, before I get into the specific questions, can you tell our attendees and other presenters what it is that Spry Health does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a California-based health technology company working with healthcare organizations to improve chronic care, remote monitoring for vulnerable patients.
Okay, perfect. So why did Spry decide they needed to build a plan?
So in response to the pandemic, I had to design a COVID-19 health and safety plan. This led to deeper discussions around business continuity and in particular, loss of key staff.
Okay. How did you end up selecting OFBEZ?
So when I started diving into creating a business continuity plan, I started by looking into ready.gov business continuity resources. From there, on their webpage, I found the OFBEZ Business Continuity Plan Toolkit, and I chose to use it because it's specifically targeted at small businesses. And since we're, just shy of 15 employees, it made sense to us to use this tool. And then, it also made a really large-scale project that I was doing for the first time digestible and accessible.
Great. So what did you like using about the toolkit?
With being an HR team of one and having a lot of competing priorities, diving into this big project, the worksheet format really made it, easy to do. Not only was there a clear worksheet of things that I needed to think through, but there was also corresponding questions and directions for each section of the project, which really helped us walk through the thought process and apply it to our company. Additionally, I really liked the risk calculator when I was initially trying to understand how to prioritize all of the possible risks. It really felt overwhelming. There's so many things to consider, but the toolkit made it easy to rate the risk by two parameters, probability and severity, which then you could use to calculate a score. So the scores we could prioritize from highest to lowest, and the results really made sense. Like when we stepped back and looked at it, the things that were the highest risk, they just made sense for our company. IBHS was also really helpful in helping us track down high quality scientific data. They helped us find our hazard mitigation plans for our county and city. So we know that we were actually basing our risks on real quality data. I really liked the business functions worksheet too. It pushed us to think of what creative workarounds could be for each function, especially for a company as lean as ours. This alongside this kind of forced transition to remote work is now pushing us to discuss what, becoming a documentation first company would look like to ensure that our knowledge and expertise aren't getting lost in case of an emergency. But overall, the toolkit really prompted a lot of good practices and discussions and identified blind spots, which is always really valuable.
Great to hear. So would you recommend the tool to someone else? And if so, what would you say to them?
Yes, definitely. In fact, I already have recommended it to a number of other HR professionals. I'm in touch with a lot of HR teams of one. And the way I described it to them is that it takes this overwhelming concept and it makes it accessible and achievable. And I found that using the toolkit as a baseline and then supplementing it with other resources and modifying it to fit our company's needs was, a real beneficial way to approach the project.
Well, great to have you as our cheerleader then. So how does it make you feel now, now that Spry has a plan in place?
It's just really created a lot of peace of mind knowing that we're not going to be caught off guard and unprepared in case of an emergency. It feels good to be having these conversations happening proactively.
Well, great. Allison, I just want to thank you, and we appreciate you reaching out to IBHS with your initial questions, which of course that led us to finding out about you and your organization using OFBEZ and then getting you onto as a panelist. So thank you, Allison, very much for your participation. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. I would now like to hand it over to our final presenter, who is Loretta Waters, Vice President at the Insurance Information Institute. Loretta?
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Christina. A little bit about the Insurance Information Institute. Next slide, please. The III is the trusted source of unique data-driven insights on insurance to inform and empower consumers. For more than 60 years, the III has helped people make educated and essential decisions. Unlike other sources, our sole focus is disseminating information. We neither lobby nor sell insurance. Next slide, please. So, why should a business plan for disasters? Well, businesses that are forced to close following a disaster run the risk of never being able to open their doors again. While there's no way to lower the risk of a natural disaster, there are critical measures that can be taken to protect your company's bottom line. A disaster plan and adequate insurance are keys to recovery. Next slide, please. 2020 has certainly been a year of disasters. Wildfires have destroyed thousands of homes and businesses and turned parts of California's wine country into an inferno, not to mention the destruction of businesses in Oregon and Washington state. Next slide, please. Businesses are also suffering major damage from rioting and looting across the country. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, which began on June 1st and runs until November 30th, so far has had 20 tropical storms, 6 hurricanes, and 1 major hurricane. With 20 named storms, it's the second most active Atlantic hurricane season on record. Already, businesses have been severely damaged or destroyed from Hurricane Laura, and Sally, which just made landfall as a Category 2 storm, is causing catastrophic flooding in the Gulf Coast. So these storms are not only becoming more frequent, but more severe. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S.'s economic downturn, the riots, they are all having further complicated this year's hurricane season preparation, overwhelming businesses and communities. So how do businesses become more resilient to withstand severe weather and other disasters? One way is through having the right type and amount of insurance. Whether a startup or an established company, every business should regularly monitor and review their risk management plan and make sure their insurance is adequate. Next slide, please. The first step is to take a business inventory, making sure to list all business equipment, like Janice mentioned, her cars, her vehicles, everything. Make sure a list of your supplies, your merchandise, just to make sure in case you have to make a claim. Taking an inventory of your business's property is really essential. It ensures you don't accidentally leave yourself uninsured by forgetting to account for key assets. The claims process goes more smoothly, and you keep track of your business's physical investments. So it's really important to do. Next slide, please. So some of the coverages you may need. Property insurance for one. Property insurance can help protect the property your business owns, leases, or rents, including things like buildings, equipment, inventory, furniture, and fixtures. It also provides coverage for loss of accounts receivable and valuable papers and records. And a business may have the option to insure its business either at replacement value or actual cash value. And the difference is that replacement value coverage can help you replace your property at market prices, whereas actual cash value coverage takes depreciation into account. Replacement value coverage costs more, but it also pays out more in the end of a claim. Next slide, please. So most people would never consider opening a business without purchasing property insurance, especially if they have a mortgage and it's required by their mortgage lender. But too many business owners fail to think about how they would keep their business afloat if they were forced to temporarily close. Business interruption coverage, also known as business income coverage, covers the loss of income that a business suffers after a disaster or due to the rebuilding process after a disaster. Next slide, please. Business interruption insurance is often included in a business owner's policy, also known as a BOP, or as a standalone or a rider to a commercial package policy. Business interruption covered perils typically include theft, vandalism, fire, wind, hail, lightning, damage from vehicles, or even aircraft. It can also include mechanical breakdown. So keep in mind a BOP is limited in scope, so you want to check with your insurance professional to ensure you have adequate coverage. Some BOPs are tailored to the individual business needs. Others are more broad-based. So you want to check and see which one is best for you. Next slide, please. Damage to the physical part of a business and its contents that is caused by riot, Fire, civil commotion, or vandalism is generally covered under a standard BOP. Some businesses purchase coverage for plate glass windows separately. Businesses that are forced to suspend operations or limit hours due to rioting may have coverage for the loss of income under business interruption insurance. However, this is only triggered if there is direct physical damage to the premises. Business interruption coverage likely has a restoration period. You may have heard your agent say that to you. This is the length of time that a policy will help pay for lost income and extra expenses while the business is being restored. Typically, there's a 48 to 72-hour waiting period before the period of restoration kicks in, which typically lasts for about 30 days, but you can extend it to 360 days by endorsement if you feel you need it. And as Janice pointed out, she had 9 months to rebuild. So really think about how long it takes your business to rebuild. Next slide, please. While business policies, insurance policies vary, typically there is business interruption coverage for civil authority orders, such as curfews, when a business has reduced hours, or when a business is unable to access its property due to a government order requiring the business to close. Such coverage nearly always requires the existence of property damage within some limited geographic radius surrounding the policyholder's location. So depending on the policy, this often ranges from 1 to 10 miles, and again has a waiting period of 24 to 72 hours before a policyholder can begin claiming the benefits of coverage. And coverage typically lasts up to 4 weeks, but the time period can be extended by paying an additional premium. However, once a curfew is lifted and the business can resume, the coverage will cease. And in terms of extra expense insurance, you want to keep in mind business insurance, interruption insurance can also include this, and that will cover anything beyond the normal day-to-day operating expenses that are necessary to keep your business solvent. So some instances of extra expenses include renting a temporary place of business while your business is being restored, any replacement of hardware, technology, and furniture, paying overtime for employees or hiring more employees, or leasing equipment. And extra expense can be bundled in a BOP as a separate insurance policy or even as a rider to a commercial policy. Next slide, please. A utility service endorsement extends business interruption and or extra expense coverage to apply to a suspension of operations caused by a disruption of basic utility service. So, this could mean something like your electric, your gas, or water provided by public or private utility companies. In fact, many business owners that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy didn't purchase this coverage, which left them in a really financially difficult situation. Next slide, please. Additional property coverage provides for items such as fences, signage, or awnings at the insured location. Since these items are particularly vulnerable to high wind, this is an important coverage to have during hurricane season. Then there's what's called ordinance or law, which provides coverage to rebuild or repair the building in compliance with the most recent building codes. And building codes, by the way, often change, so you want to have coverage to rebuild your property to code. And then, of course, there's flood insurance, which is usually not covered under a standard business owner's policy. So you want to make sure to purchase flood insurance for both own the building as well as the contents. Flood insurance can be purchased through the federal government's National Flood Insurance Program as well as through some private insurance companies. NFIP limits are $500,000 on the structure and $500,000 on the contents. So you may need to seek private insurance as a second layer of protection if the value of your building or contents is higher than that. Keep in mind there's a 30-day waiting period before being able to purchase flood insurance. Next slide, please. So let's look at some options and endorsements to business interruption coverage. One coverage you may need is called contingent business interruption insurance, also referred to as dependent properties. Contingent business interruption insurance provides insurance coverage in the event the damage or destruction of non-owned property reduces or terminates your business earnings. And next slide, please. Oh, nope, one back, sorry. So let's look at some options and endorsements to business interruption coverage. As I say, the contingent business interruption looks at coverage in the event of damage or destruction of non-owned property reduces or terminates your business's earnings. Next slide, please. While business interruption insurance can help a business survive a disaster, there are limitations and exceptions to this type of coverage. If you obtain business interruption coverage as part of a commercial property policy, the coverage will only extend to events delineated in the core coverage. So, for example, if the property insurance does not cover flood damage, you cannot receive business interruption insurance if the company is displaced because of a flood. A business interruption insurance, by the way, does not cover flood, but also earthquake, and those are under separate policies. Undocumented income that's not listed on your business financial records, any utilities, and again, that's why you need utilities, business interruption. It doesn't cover pandemics, viruses, or communicable diseases. Losses stemming from a pandemic were never intended to be protected by a business interruption policy. Only the federal government has the financial wherewithal to cover pandemic risks. Next slide, please. How much business interruption insurance you need depends on several factors. A good rule of thumb is to use your business's gross earnings and projections to estimate future profits and determine the right amount of coverage. Remember, if business interruption costs exceed the coverage limit chosen, you will have to pay out of pocket for the extra expenses. Next slide, please. So how much business interruption insurance costs depends on a number of factors, including your industry, number of employees, the amount of coverage, and then there's the deductible, and that can be a dollar or a time factor. There's also prior claims experience, so if you've had to file any claims with your insurer, this also depends on the frequency and severity of those claims. And then the price of the policy can also vary depending on your location. For example, if your business is in an area with a high risk of hurricanes, the cost of business interruption insurance may increase. Next slide, please. So by your very nature, you are risk takers, right? And that's a good thing. After all, that's how many of you have become so successful in your businesses. You've worked long, hard hours building your business, and you can be proud of your accomplishments. But smart business owners recognize that business insurance is an essential element of an overall business plan. It should be factored in just as you do with fixed operational expenses such as utilities, the cost of electricity, gas, phones, trash, sewer services. Without adequate coverage, you may have to pay out of pocket for costly damages from a riot, hurricane, or other disaster, and that could spell financial ruin for you. Next slide, please. Disasters aren't always natural. They can be man-made. We've seen that after 9/11. The 19th anniversary just passed, and that's a stark reminder that disasters come in many forms, from hurricanes, wildfires, riots, to terrorism. And often larger businesses will have risk managers to help them make the right insurance decisions. But when you look at smaller businesses, they have to be their own risk managers. And the best way to know your risk is to consult with your insurance professional who can help you make the right decisions. Anybody who next slide, please. Any participants who want more information on business insurance or other types of insurance can access the III's website at iii.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Loretta, and thank you to all of our speakers today. As we wrap up this hour-long session, all businesses are at risk, but remember, plans allow businesses to get a jump start on recovery, reopen faster, and reduce losses. Business continuity is a constant in everyday business. Well, we are at our time limit for today, but as we wrap up, I'd like to share with you contact information for all of our speakers today in case you'd like to reach out and learn more. Again, we had Alex Contreras with the SBA, Janice Jucker from Three Brothers Bakery, Gail Morton from IBHS, Allison Bishop with Spry Health, and Loretta Waters from III. We thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. We will be sure to share the recording with all who registered for the event as soon as it becomes available. We hope you have a safe and good rest of your day. Thanks so much.